Hey guys, what's up? Aaron Dahl here. I just got done watching the Tarkov Devblog that they did today. They did a live stream. They had like 13 people on there. There was a ton of people on there. They talked about a ton of different stuff, so I'm going to just kind of go over that and break it down one by one here. I'm going to list all the things that I didn't think were all that important or didn't really come to a conclusion first. So I won't really talk about these things a lot. So if you're interested in any of these, just to save you the time so you don't have to watch a bunch of or watch through a bunch of stuff that you don't really care about to look for something that's not going to be here. They talked about cosmetic differences like adding quests for them, stuff like that. They talked about 45 weapons, Vector 1911, stuff like that, coming in eventually. They didn't say exactly when, I don't think. They talked about a new shotgun. There's a Mossberg shotgun coming. There's some new tools that they're planning for tasks and different functionalities in the hideout and stuff like that. They talked about for a while changes to thermals, but because they didn't really ever decide on what they wanted to do or what everybody thought would be a good idea, there's not really much to say there. And then new tasks and more of a storyline to some of the tasks, but they were very vague and unspecific. Nikita just said he wanted to do that, so all that stuff got talked about, and I'm sure some people think a lot of that's important and stuff, but there wasn't really enough for me to touch on a lot of that, so I probably won't get into too much of that here. So we'll just get into the things that I thought were really important. Okay, so first things first, interchange. They're making lighting changes. This is probably the best picture I think that they released. They released a couple others, but they want to change the lighting on interchange, which is huge because I'm sure, as everybody knows, for a while now it's been to where you're in certain parts of the mall. It's not necessarily even that it's dark or anything like that. It's just that when you try to look into certain areas, you're really disadvantaged. So depending on where you're standing, you can see people and they can't see you and stuff like that. So hopefully this addresses a lot of those problems. Interchange has been one of my favorite levels for a long time, but the lighting has always annoyed the crap out of me. Like Ollie, I avoid at all costs because fighting in Ollie is so weird, just depending on where you're standing. And if you have any light coming in your window or anything, I mean, rip, you're done. So I'm really excited about that. An even bigger change that they were talking about was adding new extracts. Nikita said 3 new extracts, which is interesting. I figured they would just do the other 2 corners, but I guess there is kind of room. I would assume, if I had to guess, I would say they do the opposite 2 corners that they have now, maybe, but maybe not, because Power Stations already kind of got a built-in extract up there. So maybe not, but then I would guess one of them would go out kind of across from the rail station, across the woods from that, in that area, because there's really nothing over in that corner. There is a couple stashes out there and stuff. Plus they already had one of those red gates up there, which makes me kind of think that they planned on putting something there eventually anyway, so that would make sense. So that's my guess, at least. They talked about the Kiva alarm, which we've all heard about forever, and he pretty much confirmed there will be raiders for that event when the alarm goes off. So that'll be cool, but they did say that they weren't sure if that was going to come in 12.4, which the other changes are coming in 12.4. So either way, the other changes are the more important ones. So interchange should get a lot better here soon, which is pretty exciting because, like I said, I really like interchange. And we'll hope that maybe the alarm gets added in that time. If nothing else, even if you're not a fan of it, at least we'll be able to see how it's going to work. Test it out. The earlier they get it in, the better they can get it into a state where everybody's happy with it and likes it. So sooner the better there. Let's hope it goes well. So interchange was probably the biggest. We'll get into some smaller stuff now. One of the big things that they showed that everybody was kind of hyped about, and in positive and negative ways, were these rifle grenades. So they showed a couple different ones here. Let me resize them. And I just assume they're probably for different guns, or they look a little different. Maybe they're different purposes. Somebody was making conjecture about one of them might be like a Molotov type thing, like a fire thing. I'm not sure if that's actually correct or not, but they did say something about it. And then one just looks more like a frag grenade type thing. They said something about underbarrel grenade launchers, but they didn't like show any art for grenades outside of this. They showed some of the flare gun shells, which we'll get into. but they seemed to make it sound like they were focused on the rifle grenades and the underbarrel launchers. I didn't hear them say anything about like the standalone launchers, like the 6-shell, 8-shell launchers that people have been talking about. So I don't know if that's on a different timeline. It's kind of confusing, this situation, just because they've talked about it in so many different instances without giving a concrete plan of when certain things are coming, if they're coming together, whatnot. So this will be interesting to see. I'm really not a fan of the idea of rifle grenades or grenade launchers of any type. I realize that's an opinion. I just don't think it's going to be good for the game personally, but I know a lot of people really want them. So for those people, that's definitely a good thing. And then, like I said, same thing with interchange. The sooner they get it in there, the sooner we can see what's going on with it. So if nothing else, we'll be able to start seeing how they work and learn encounters to them, stuff like that. See how the economy's going to work with them and how often you'll run into them, stuff like that. So at least if they get them in there now, we can figure that kind of stuff out, and we'll see how that plays out, I guess. I hadn't heard of this at all before now either. Maybe I'm just behind the times, but they introduced these airdrops, and they said that, because Pestily asked about it, they said that it would be, you use a flare, probably a certain type of one, to call in an airdrop. So it won't be like static on the map where every map has one of these during the raid, or it won't be like they spawn at the beginning or anything like that. From what I understand, it'll be something somebody has to call in. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic. You use it as bait to get people to come. We'll just have to see how that plays out. I don't know that I'm a huge fan of that idea, but like everything else with Tarkov and pretty much any game, we'll just have to see how it plays out once it actually gets in the game. So here we go. I guess we're PUBG now. Okay, so another big thing they talked about was Streets. They didn't say anything really specific about Streets or when it was coming or anything like that, I don't think. But they did say that it would have up to 40 players at one point they were planning on, which is insane compared to the other maps in this game. That's going to be nuts. Obviously, they don't plan on doing that right at the beginning. I would guess probably 10 to 15 like the other big levels have at the beginning, somewhere in there. And then they'll work up to that, because based on the way some of the servers run now, with that many people, having 40 people would be pretty much impossible. So that's going to be really interesting. It makes me think that this map must be either really large or tall. Obviously, it's a city, so I guess it doesn't have to necessarily be super large, like just area-wise. If there's enough buildings to go up and down and stuff, and the people will be spread out either way. The map doesn't necessarily have to be super, like, shoreline size. You know, it could be even smaller than that, just with more territory to roam in that area by making it taller. So I'm not sure. They have released screenshots for Streets before, but nothing that shows like the whole scope of it that I know of. So we'll see how this goes. I think it'll be really cool to have at least an option to play a bigger map with more people in it and stuff. It'll definitely be interesting, and I would imagine they'll have more scavs if they have that many people and stuff, which could really make it feel so much different than other maps if you're constantly getting into fights because there's 40 players and 40 scavs in there and there's just people everywhere. That would be kind of cool. So if they can get that to work right, that'll be super sweet. I'm pretty stoked about that. We'll see how that plays out. I've already been looking forward to Streets. I think it'll be, just because of the layout, a totally different map than a lot of the others. We don't have anything that's a tall map so far. You can get on the towers and interchange, you can get on resort, whatever, but those are specific isolated areas. The dome on reserve, there's not any map that's tall all over the place like a city would be. Reserve is probably the closest thing. There are a lot of roofs you can get on and stuff, so they kind of moved in that direction, and I've really liked Reserve, so I think that's a good omen. I think Streets will end up probably being one of my favorite maps at this rate. I know Reserve is one of my favorite right now, so we'll hope it turns out to where they can bump that player count up pretty quickly, because I'm really interested to see how that goes. Okay, this is something they've been talking about for a while now, the armor plates. It seems like it's coming pretty soon, if not in 12.4. I'm hesitant to guarantee anything coming out in that, because then I'm on the line for it. But they showed a couple different pictures. Nikita had said rigs specifically. I don't remember hearing him say vests in this stream, like you would be able to put plates in different just armor vests as opposed to the rigs. but it could be both, and he either just didn't mention it, or he's mentioned it before, so he didn't feel like he needed to. So, either way, it's going to be cool if you could put smaller plates in just to keep yourself quick, and then maybe, the rigs, like a Gen 4 with the arms and all that stuff is still armor on the outside, so it could make it to where, in the center mass, you could keep it heavier and have it be more protective, but then if you don't have as much plates in it, like the bigger ones, the outside areas would still be armored, they'd just be a lower class of armor. Seems like it could make it a lot of work for them. I'm not exactly sure. It could be, could not be. I'm not a developer, so what do I know? But it'll definitely be a cool system. Something I'm sure you'll be able to mess around with in the hideout and stuff like that, which they obviously need more stuff to do in there. There's not a ton to do right now in there. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so this is a big one that they've talked about for a long time too, that a lot of people really want, is the compass. I personally really don't understand the super hype of the compass, just because for anything except for factory or labs maybe, you can really tell your orientation on the maps fairly easy, at least to me. Maybe that's just me, but when you look at the the in-game maps or whatever, or the ones people have made online, you can get an orientation of it by looking at the map one time, and then as long as you know the four walls of the map, you're always going to be able to tell the cardinal directions pretty easy. A lot of people, when I said that, when I was talking in chats and Discords and stuff, were like, oh no, it'll be way better and it'll make sure everybody's on the same page and stuff. So maybe they're right there, and maybe this is something that people will be really hyped about. I don't know, I could be wrong too. Maybe I've been thinking it was north the whole time and it wasn't. But either way, I've kind of got it established, in my group of people that I play with and stuff like that. I know, especially Davey, my buddy Davey and I, when we call stuff out, we'll say north, stuff like that, already, so we just have to change what directions we were using, and then after that, after a couple matches, you would never really need the compass again, because you would just know by habit. Now, the degree markers could be really useful in a firefight, so I definitely think that'll be useful, where you could say 280, whatever, as long as it's not too clunky to check it, which I hope it's not going to be. It shouldn't be. It should just be a key press. You can look at it real quick, or maybe they'll have it to where it is on a certain part of the watch here. Maybe you'll be able to see it just kind of in your peripherals if you're using a rifle or whatever. It could be really interesting, so we'll see how that goes. Maybe I'm wrong with the it's not that big of a deal. Maybe it will be. It just, we'll have to see how it gets implemented and what happens, but it's definitely a cool thing either way. So alright, we're almost down to the bottom of the content type stuff. Nikita mentioned that something he really wanted to do and was really excited about was making jams and misfires more of a thing. I'm sure a lot of you guys know now that if you have a VSS or an MP5, something that puts out a lot of rounds, and you use that for multiple raids, it can jam. I think a lot of people don't even know that jams are in the game, because if you don't use those type of guns a lot that put out a ton of rounds, usually an ADAR or SKS, anything semi-auto for sure, if you don't use that same exact one over and over and over again, it never gets to a point where it's going to jam, because you haven't put enough rounds for the gun. Right now, that durability level where that starts becoming a problem is pretty hard to get to with any gun other than a VSS or something like that. But it is part of the game right now. He said he intends to make that more of a common thing, and that he's really excited about that. He thinks it'll make firefights more, well, the exact words he said was it'll add a lot of emotion to the game. I think it adds a lot of RNG to the game, really, just depending on how they implement it. If it ends up to where, people are losing a lot of fights because random jams and stuff, I guess that would theoretically balance itself out, because you will kill other people if their weapons jam and stuff. I'm not sure how this will go. This is one of those things you definitely have to see how they implement it, and feel it in the game yourself to see what happens. I think it could be really good. I think it could be a pain in the ass. Like I've said with a lot of this stuff, especially with this game, you just gotta kind of see it. We'll see what happens. It seemed like he wanted to get on top of this, so if that comes soon, I guess we'll get a chance to test it, see how it goes. But just keep a heads up for that when you're checking patch notes for the next patches and stuff. That might be something you have to worry about that you haven't really had to worry about before. So just keep that in the back of your mind when new releases are coming out. Watch out for that. Then the last kind of content thing that they talked about of a lot of substance was zeroing. Veritas and Pestily kind of brought this up. A couple other people kind of dismissed it, but it is kind of a problem just because it's not intuitive right now the way that they have it implemented. You'll say your gun's at 100 meters when you hit that, but then depending on what optic you're using, it will or won't be. Certain calibers are affected a lot more than others, which realistically could make sense, but either way, when you zero a gun in real life, anybody that hunts or anything like that, and you're in the military or anything like that, I hunt, so if I zero my shotgun when I'm going to go hunt a deer to 100 meters, I could put whatever I want on top of that. If I sighted it to the rib at 100 meters, or if I put, an optic on it and I sighted it to 100 meters, it doesn't matter what else I add or anything to the shotgun, it's going to shoot at 100 meters until I wear out that zero. I mean, that can happen, but it's odd that a modification to the gun would change that. I get that you would have to then zero the optic to that spot, but you would think you would be able to go into the hideout or something, which this was one of the suggestions those guys brought up, was you could go into the hideout, put that optic on, test fire it, zero it to that. Then when you get into the game with that optic on there, it is zeroed to that optic. You shouldn't have to mess with it much, or if you need to make the changes are being made relative to that optic since you've already set it there. Now that's kind of work, I guess, but it just seems like it's better than the system right now, where depending on what FOV you're on, depending on what weapon it is, depending on what optic it is, all these little variables just make these random arbitrary changes to your zeroing that makes it confusing for new people. Personally, I don't mess with zeroing. I just don't. It's just too much of a pain in the butt. It's inconsistent between guns and stuff like that. I use the same gun a lot. I use the VSS a lot. I've kind of just gotten it to where I have a feel for when someone's at this distance, I need to aim up this much. And it's just because the system's so clunky, I don't want to mess with it. And I would rather just do it on the fly like that. And that's my personal preference. And maybe I would just keep doing that even if they did do all these fixes. I don't know, but it definitely seems like, especially for new people, it's not friendly right now. I have the benefit of having talked to the dude who made a whole video about this stuff on a regular basis and stuff, so I have at least an understanding of it, and I still don't want to mess with it. So I can't imagine that new people are coming in and thinking that it's fun to try and fuck around with that when they're trying to shoot somebody at 200 meters and stuff, and it's just like inconsistent depending on what gun they're using. They're already new, this game's hard enough, so I think they definitely need to make a change there. Now, this is one thing I included. It didn't seem like they came to like a consensus answer, because like I said, some of the guys disagreed that it wasn't that big of an issue, etc. I don't know what they will do, but it seems like it's still part of, Nikita's focusing attention on that a little bit. He wants to figure out something with it, so that's good. Hopefully they work with those guys that had some good ideas for it, and they can figure something out, because that's definitely something I would like to see fixed eventually. So, as opposed to the content parts of the devblog that they did, they talked about server issues, so I want to kind of put this in its own category here. This is probably the most important thing to me, and I'm sure a lot of people right now. Ever since the Twitch drops, the bigger streamers started coming around. The game has gone up in popularity for obvious reasons. They were saying today that they have like over 100,000 people playing it at certain times, and that the servers have just not been able to handle keeping up with that. They recognize that like issues like they had this past weekend, I'm sure you're all aware, everybody was getting kicked out constantly. I got kicked out multiple times of raids, died, lost all my gear because someone reconnected before me. Some people were lucky, they got their stuff back, some people didn't. It was a mess, dude. Every streamer I know had problems. It was a whole server backend just crashing issue, and they recognized that was unacceptable. They did reimburse people 1,000,000 rubles for that, But then as they're doing this devblog 3 or 4 times throughout that, because they had gotten people to log in to get that 1 million rubles, I don't know why everybody thought they needed to get it right that second. That's kind of funny to me. Just get it when you go play later. It's not going anywhere. But they caused the game to crash 3 or 4 times while they're doing the devblog. That's like a bad look. I get that it's harder. This is a big thing Nikita stressed. It's harder than a lot of people think to get the servers into a stable point when you're used to a smaller player base, and then all of a sudden you have this huge influx of people come in. So I definitely understand all that, and I'm not trying to say I expect them to get it perfect or anything right now. But it was definitely a really bad look to have those issues while they're trying to apologize for having those issues and saying that the weekend is a big part of the issues. So maybe execute that a little better. I don't know. But the big issue that they said they were having was that when they tried to get in contact with their server providers, that the server provider wouldn't have servers available a lot of the times in the areas they needed. An example he gave was Washington, D.C. He said that they wanted to get more servers for that area, and that they asked, but there wasn't any available, and they were offered servers in New York. So while those are more servers and they can take those and run with that, it doesn't help everyone all the time. And New York and Washington are close, so that might not have been the best example for them to use. But you can see how if they don't have any in those 2 areas and they have some in Chicago or they have some in California or Canada, whatever, that's not going to help those other people. So that's a crappy problem to deal with. I'm not sure how you get around that. I don't know if they have like a contractual obligation where they can't seek out servers from other hosts, or if that's even practical or possible. Like I said, I'm not a developer, so maybe it's a case where using servers from multiple companies just isn't really practical and it's hard for the game to function that way. I'm really not sure how all that works, but I hope that they can come to some sort of solution with that, because it didn't really seem like he had an idea of how they were going to cope with that other than just persevere through it. Eventually those servers will become available, and eventually they'll be able to get enough of them going to overtake the new player base. It's nerve-wracking answer. Like I said, I don't expect them to fix it instantaneously or anything like that, obviously. But you do kind of hope that it at least gets better over time, and I don't think that answer gave us like a real clear indication either way of whether it's going to get better or if it's going to be like this for a while or what. So that's not really going to assuage people's fears much. At least they are working on it. I don't think we can blame them a ton for those kind of issues when it's a third-party issue, but man, it's hard. You don't want to deal with waiting every time you want to try and get in a match. You don't want to get kicked out multiple times and lose all your gear. It's going to get frustrating to people no matter how understanding they are, and I totally get that. So let's just hope that they come to some sort of better solution here soon with that. I wish I had a better answer for you guys on that. It sounds like they're trying to do it, so let's hope they do it. So that's all I got. Like I said, there was a bunch of other little minor stuff they talked about. There's probably a lot I didn't cover even in that list. I just tried to get even out of that the, semi-important things. I'm sure we'll get more when we get actual patch notes, stuff like that, but this is at least a breakdown for people who didn't get a chance to watch it. I appreciate you guys checking out the video. I stream usually right now. I try to get Monday through Friday. Obviously for today I didn't get a stream up, but usually like around 1 p.m. Eastern time I'll start streaming. So stop by sometime if you want to come hang out, ask questions, disagree with me on my bad opinions on things, whatever you want to do. I'm open to all that. Thanks, guys.